Perfect. Thank you. Sorry. Start.
Hey, hello everyone. I'm your current VP of Relations, Bella Kirakosin. I want to welcome you all to our ASGCC interview training. If you're here, I'm assuming you're considering joining ASGCC, and I'm very happy you took the time to, you took the opportunity to join us today and get a better understanding of what you're getting yourself into. I'm sure many of you are either returning senators or senators who may have already applied, so you're familiar with the process of interviews that take place before we select our senators. And if you don't, that's what today's event is for. You know, the other VPs and I are very familiar with this process because not only have we gone through it multiple times ourselves, we've also been on the other end as well. We've sat through and scored hundreds of interviews, and most times we notice that this may be a student's first real interview. And so it could be very stressful if you're unaware of the determining factors and how to properly answer some of our questions. So we decided that it was a good idea to introduce you guys to the behavioral interview process and that we use, the scoring method we use, and just basic tips on how you guys can answer these questions more professionally. We're also going to have our VPs and our president introduce the responsibilities of their committees, so each of you can get a glimpse into which committee you might want to be a part of. Unfortunately, you can't choose which committee you're put into because that's the VP's job, but you can get an idea of how to construct your answers effectively to show that you're qualified for the, let's say, the administration committee or the activities committee. Also try and see which committee fits best with your major. That could help you out as well. And so I hope that you guys find this very helpful. Without any further ado, I'm gonna have the rest of the VPs introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, my name is Sunay Gakian. I'm the ASGCC President and Student Trustee.
Hi everyone, my name is Kayla Regalado. I'm the Vice President of Administration.
Hi guys, I'm Royce. I'm the Vice President of Finance.
Hi, I'm Leah and I'm the Vice President of Organizations.
And my name is Andre Manukian. I'm a staff member at Glendale Community College, and I'm the advisor, one of the two advisors to the Associated Students of Glendale Community College. And I'll be talking later on today about the exact interview process.
So what is ASGCC? So I'm going to read this and then try to summarize it afterwards. So ASGCC is the official student government organization on campus. The ASGCC legislature is a group of students elected and appointed to represent the varied interests of GCC's incredibly diverse student body. We address the various concerns of our students and connect the gap between students and administrators. We support student groups and sponsor campus life. We are here for the students. So to sum it up, we're basically the student government at GCC. Now we have about 20 senator positions, 5 vice president positions, and 1 president position. For the senator positions, like it mentions, you have to go through an interview process to be selected. However, for the vice president and the president positions, you have to run in an election and get voted as president or vice presidents. So some of the things you guys will be doing as senators include attending legislative meetings every Tuesday with the rest of ASGCC to weigh in on important decisions that will affect the entire campus body. We have around $1 million budget, so you guys will be approving or denying some of these requisitions that will go out to the campus. In addition, you guys will have seats on governance committees, which are basically committees with other faculty and staff members. And like I mentioned, you guys are going to be weighing on really, really, really important decisions that affect everyone on campus. Now, each committee is different from the other one. So each committee does something separate. And like Bella mentioned, we're going to be going through each committee and you guys will get to know what you guys will do. But let's say you're a senator in the Relations Committee, you're more likely to be handling our ASGC Instagram, taking pictures and all of that. However, if you're a senator in the Activities Committee, you're probably going to be in events, setting up events, cleaning up events. And if you're a senator in the Organizations Committee, you're going to be handling with clubs. So each committee is different, and as we talk about the committees, you guys will get a sense of what you guys will do in each committee. But overall, like I mentioned, you guys will be making really important decisions, and honestly, that's like the best part of ASGCC. At the end of the day, you guys are the ones that will talk and advocate for student needs.
Thanks so much, Sune. I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the administration committee, which I oversee as a VP of admin. If you want, you can take a look and read through these slides, but not all of it might make complete sense right now. So I'm just going to break it down for you guys. So basically what the admin committee does is we oversee policy and regulations for the ASGCC. What that means is we go over our different governing documents, like we go over the ASGCC constitution, bylaws, our election code, and we just make any revisions as we see fit. We also work a lot on advocacy. So I don't know if you guys have received an email about the student representation fee, but the admin committee of ASGCC is going to have a big hand in that, and a big hand in lobbying for student needs. Last semester, we did a letter writing campaign to advocate for all-inclusive financial aid. And this semester, although it had to get canceled, we were planning to lobby up in Sacramento, and just talk to our different representatives up there and kind of advocate on behalf of California community college students and then GCC students specifically. A little bit more about what we do is we keep all records for the ASGCC. So we keep all records for meetings, we keep all records of attendance, things like that. And then that very last bullet, it says we organize inter-organizational activities for ASGCC. And what that means is that we just organize events for the members of ASGCC specifically. So it's like our retreat that we have every semester and our end of the semester banquet. And I'm gonna pass it on to Roy.
Hi guys, I'll be introducing the Finance Committee and its responsibilities. So the Finance Committee is, like you would imagine, it manages the finances of ASGCC. It's a super critical part of ASGCC because it makes sure everyone that's requesting money and depositing money is abiding by the finance code. And that's super important so that it matches up with the education code of California. Also, when people are requesting money, they have to go through a process, and that process is either to go through the Vice President of Finance or to go through the legislature. And for each request of money, they need a requisition, and each requisition is overseen by the Vice President of Finance. Oftentimes, the Senators of Finance draft the requisitions, but in the end, it's signed by the Vice President of Finance. So that's the process of going through a request for approval of money. And for every external account that the ASGCC funds, for example, organizations on campus that are not within ASGCC, a good example would be the Multicultural Center. They have to put in a requisition through Ani Goodbarian, the business office manager, and she develops a finance report every week that we have to approve during Ledge. And that's the most critical part of the finance responsibilities, to oversee that, look through it, and make a recommendation to the legislator on how to approach the finance report each week. So that's the biggest part of the weekly responsibilities of Finance Committee. But on the bigger scale, the grander scale, we also approve the ASGCC budget and administer campus grants. And the ASGCC budget has a line item description for each account. So each account has a description as to what they can use their money on, what their expenditure is allowed. So within the line item budget, the Finance Committee has to make sure every person that's withdrawing money from that account is within the line item budget. We actually have a $800,000 operating budget that's consistent of funding athletics, external accounts such as organization programs on campus, and the the biggest part of the budget is the ASGCC internal accounts that funds everything that goes on internally through AS, which you will find out.
Okay, so next up we have the activities committee. I'm actually not the VP of activities, but our VP couldn't make it today, so I'll be filling in for him. So as a senator of activities, you guys will be able to host events for the entire student body. These events are public and they're open to everyone who attends GCC. You guys will also set an activities calendar ahead of time for the campus. So in the beginning of the semester, you guys will meet up with your VP, decide on the activities you guys want to do, create a calendar, and we'll be able to put this on our ASGCC website so other students can see as well. And you guys will monitor, organize, and conduct the GCC graduation activities. So like I mentioned, the activities committee, as the senator, you guys will basically just be putting on activities, setting up for activities, cleaning up activities. You guys will also be able to pitch in ideas of events you guys want to do. And this can include basically anything. And also you'll be able to make flyers and create budget breakdowns. And once you create these budget breakdowns, you'll have to take that to our legislative meetings, like I mentioned, every Tuesday. And depending on how much it costs, you guys will be able to explain why you need the money and why, where the money is going to for that event. And the legislative, everyone in ASGC will be able to vote on it or deny it.
Okay, me again. So the Relations Committee focuses mostly on marketing. So we're in charge of the ASGCC Instagram, as well as the ASGCC website. We try to reach as many students as possible through social media. So it takes a pretty creative mind to be able to, adapt and grow in accordance to like current trends, to see what students are into, what students are looking to be engaged with, and that's what my committee does. That's what my committee promotes. So for example, TikTok, the app TikTok is pretty major right now. So depending on how the next relations committee decide which direction the next relations committee decides to go in, you might see a future ASGCC TikTok page. That's definitely the surface of what we do. We also support athletics. We try to get ASGCC as involved in athletics as possible, going to games, supporting their games, their meets on our social media pages. We're also the liaison to campus police facilities, constantly showing them our appreciation. We do a facility, the campus police luncheon each semester. Unfortunately, we can't do that this semester, but we sent them like little gifts at the beginning of the semester to show our appreciation. Also, last semester during Welcome Week, we helped our Dean of Student Affairs coordinate an event with campus police to kind of promote like safe and healthy relationships between the students and police to get to know each other. So that's basically what we do. As well as we plan events just like all the other committees. We are responsible for planning educational initiative events to promote, learning and fun in the same environment. So if you think you are, all about marketing and you're good with, talking to people, sharing good ideas about, what ASGCC does, how to get more students involved, then the Relations Committee might be the one for you. And yeah, that's our website, glendale.edu/AS. And our Instagram is as.gcc. So please follow us if you don't already.
Hello. So as I said before, I'm the VP of organization, so I'll be talking about what we do as a committee. So the first thing, the main thing that we do is, as mentioned before, we work with the clubs on campus. So we oversee over 50 clubs on campus, and we recruit them and register them to be an official GCC club. Once clubs are an official club, they are part of the Inter-Organizational Council, which is the IOC. And my committee hosts the IOC meetings every other Monday. And in these meetings, we basically approve the funding requests from clubs. Any event that a club wants to host, it has to go through us. So they bring in the money that they they request the money and we approve it at these IOC meetings. And then my committee recommends this to the ASGCC legislature. And then that's when it's approved. Other than that, we run the ASGCC clubs account, which is like very similar to the ASGCC account. It's just, this is directed more towards club to help promote events that the clubs are hosting. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Sorry, I was on mute. So I'm going to spend some time talking about the interview process. But before I do that, I just kind of want to summarize what everyone just said. What you just heard is there's a question of what's the last committee again? It's the organizations committee. What you just heard are what our 5 committees in the ASGCC do. So the organizational structure is the VP and the 5 committees underneath the president, the 5 VPs underneath the president, which each oversee a committee, and then each of them has a senator, multiple senators. Some have 3 senators, some have 5 senators. And those 20 senators, the 5 VPs, and the president make up the ASGCC legislature. So when you're a member of the ASGCC as a senator, you're both a member of your committee, and you're going to do committee-related work, like you heard about what each of those committees does. But you're also a member of the greater legislature, which basically means that you're going to be making decisions as a student government that impacts all students. If you're a new senator, you also have to take a leadership course with me that I teach. And all the senators are also participating in governance work, which means that you're meeting with staff and faculty and making college level decisions. One of the things that a lot of people don't know as they enter this position is we're very different than your high school student government. A high school student government is part of the high school. ASGCC is actually what's called an auxiliary of the college, meaning it's separate from the college. The ASGCC is its own corporation. We're a registered corporation with the IRS. We file taxes separately from the college. We own businesses. We own the bookstore, the vending machines. We have other operational things that we do. So you're applying to be part of this corporation as a board member, so as a senator, to be part of this legislature. And so that's just like a quick summary. And then you're going to be doing in every single committee. I don't know if I've seen some of you at our events. You do, on top of all that work, you're also putting on a lot of educational events that each of the committees does. I got a text, why are you yelling? Sorry for yelling. I'm just very passionate about ASGCC. So now the reason why we did this event is because we want to make sure that you are prepared when you come into the interview. Becoming a member of ASGCC is extremely competitive. We are going to most likely, by the time that we start interviews, which is end of June, early July, have 200 applicants going for 20 positions. So that's how competitive it is. Now, the 50 of you who are here, congratulations, because you're going to get an advantage of seeing a little bit more about our interview process, and we'll talk about the type of questions we ask and how you can answer them. There was a question here, vending machines are colleges. They're not Glendale College's vending machines, they're the ASGCC's vending machines. So we take all the vending machine profits and it goes into the ASGCC budget that Roy talked about being 800,000. Yeah, and so 10% selection rate is what we're anticipating this year. And so it is competitive, but it's one of probably the best leadership opportunities you can have at Glendale College. I was a member of ASGCC 19 or 18 years ago, and then I went off to a lot of other colleges, and I'll tell you that this is one of the strongest student governments that I've seen, both in leadership development and the type of work that you do. in terms of who owns the vending machines, it's AS owns them and they contract the company to run them basically. Yeah, so thank you, Roy, for answering that. And so we're answering some questions in chat as well. But as far as the interview process itself, we wanted to talk to you about that to make sure that when you answer the questions, you do it in a way that maximizes your chances of being the group of senators, the 20 senators that are selected. And so if we can go to the next slide. So all the questions, you will come in, the interview will be really fast. It's literally gonna be 4 minutes maybe. Sorry, not 4 minutes, 4 questions. And it's gonna be 15 minutes, the entire interview. Maybe they'll have 5 questions, it always changes, but it's really a 15-minute interview, and then we have about a 5-minute transition between interviews. And we're gonna ask very pointed, what we call behavioral questions. And behavioral questions are questions that will always, other than the first question, which is not graded, all the other questions are going to ask you for a specific example. That's the definition of a behavioral question. And so we're not going to ask you, if you were a fruit or a vegetable, what would you be and why? We're not going to ask you, what are your strengths and weaknesses? We're going to ask you for a specific example related to a specific situation. So it might be, I'll give you an example of a behavioral question. Give me an example of a time that you disagreed with your professor. That's a behavioral question because we ask you for a specific example of something. And all your answers for those questions have to follow the STAR method. And I will talk about the STAR method in the next slide. And that's going to be the most important way to answer the questions to get the maximum amount of points in the answer. But the way to never, if one slide back, sorry, really quick. The way that you should never answer behavioral question is, I don't have an example of that. So let me give you an example of something that if we asked, give me an example of a time that you disagreed with your professor or your teacher. And you answer, I'm usually really friendly and I agree with my professors a lot. You will not be able to get any points on that question. Now, we won't ask you, give me a time that you disagree with a professor. That's just a sample I'm using. But just so you know, the type of questions that we're answering, every single person out there should have at least one example. Now, if we can go to the next slide. And so all your answers need to be answered with what we call the STAR method. And this is not something that ASGCC created. Almost every innovative company out there right now uses the STAR method for answering or for evaluating answers to the interview questions. And the STAR method, it stands for situation, task, action, and results. And so I'll talk a little bit about each, and then we're gonna actually practice some of it. And so if we, for instance, before I talk about each, one of the things that you also need to really think about is you have about 2 minutes to answer any question. And so where most people go wrong is when we ask a question like, give me an example of a time that you disagreed with your professor, they will spend all their time talking about the situation. Well, there was this one time I took Math 101 class and this professor was really mean and I got a really bad grade on a test. And when I went back and I talked to this professor, they said this and this and this. And then, you know, like this professor was also really unfair to a lot of students and other students had the same exact issue. See, that's like someone who answers way too much on the situation component. The situation is, all a situation is you have to just describe what was happening and the specific events. And the situation for any question that we're gonna ask you can be from a previous job. It can be from volunteer experience. It can be from your involvement in other clubs or organizations, whether that's in college or in high school. it can be even from a personal experience. So the situation is going to be the first thing that you need to include, but it needs to be really fast. It's give us a good understanding of what was happening. What you cannot do is answer generally. The situation has to be specific. So if I say, for instance, the question is, give me an example of a time you disagreed with a classmate of yours. And you say, you know, there's been a few times that I've disagreed with a classmate of mine. And usually when that happens, I go talk to them, I do this, I do that. That's not specific enough. So you have to get really specific in your answer if that's the question. One of the times that I disagreed with his classmate was when I took a class, when I took English 101 with Roy Kala. And I disagreed with him when we were working on a project together, our final project. And the reason why I disagreed with him is he thought that we needed to focus in on animals, and I thought we needed to focus in on businesses for our final project, right? Like, so that's the situation, 30 seconds or less, but that's very specific. Then for about 10 seconds or so, you're gonna tell us what was your task? And task just means goal. My goal in this situation was to make sure that Roy and I can come to an amicable agreement that both of us would be happy. And this next part is where almost, I would say 50, 60% of the students out there miss completely. They don't even talk about the A. And that's probably the most important part of any answer you give. And that's action. You have to spend probably half your answer talking about action. And so your actions have to be specific steps that you took in that situation. So if it's a professor that I was disagreeing with, maybe the actions are, I scheduled a meeting with the professor and I met them in their office. I explained to them why I was concerned about the way that they graded a particular assignment. When this didn't work, I did A, B, and C after that. I went and spoke to their department chair because I still continued to disagree with them. Now, again, we won't ask you about a professor, that's just a sample, but do you see how your actions need to be extremely, extremely specific? And when you answer these questions, and specifically around the action portion of the answers, you really need to talk about what actions you took, not what actions other people took or the group as a whole took. You know, if I asked, give me an example of a time that you took a trip with a group of people, and your actions are you telling us about how this person was in charge of booking flights, and we as a group kind of came together and decided on a date. That's not really talking about you. So you really need to focus in on the actions that you took. And then results. Again, really important, about 20 seconds to wrap it up. The results are what ended up happening. Some people completely forget to talk about it. So they answer the first part of the question because we say, for instance, give me an example of a time you disagreed with a professor, but we still want to know what the results were, even if we don't follow up saying what happened at the end. So you have to include that in your answer. And so the results were that my professor ended up changing my grade on that final assignment. That could be one result. So specific outcomes from what was the actions that you took. You can also, in your results, talk about what did you learn from the situation. So if I'm answering that question, I might say, in addition to my grade being changed, one of the other things that I learned from going through this is the importance of communication and how it's really important to keep clear channels of communication between myself and my professor. And so that's how we want you. I hope that doesn't scare people off, but it sounds more complex than it is. But that's really a summary of how to get the maximum number of points on any question you're asked in the ASGCC interview. That's how you should be answering them. Any questions about this portion first? And then I'm gonna maybe do a couple samples. If anyone wants to volunteer, you can either use the raise hand feature, or you can just hop in or put it in chat that you want to volunteer. And we can ask some sample questions so people can see how the answers look. I think Virginia is volunteering for this one. But prior to starting with Virginia, any questions about the STAR method itself or the type of interview questions we ask you all?
I was just trying to type, but okay, I will say. So this thing that you said needs really fast reaction on things that maybe happened for a long time ago. And yeah, for the example that you said, if somebody doesn't have any situation close to that, can it be something similar to, or it has to be the exact?
It can be similar, but it needs to really answer the question. So if the question is, tell me about a time you disagreed with a professor, you can't answer, tell me about a time you agreed with a professor. Does that make sense? So it still needs to be on it, but you might change it up and be like, there isn't a professor at Glendale College because I started here just this semester, but let me tell you about a time I disagreed with a teacher of mine in high school. So that's a similar answer.
All right.
But you just won't be able to completely change the question to be something else.
Thanks.
Any other questions about the STAR method or the type of questions we ask? Now, I'm giving you an example of questions that are not going to be asked to you because each exec committee develops their own questions later on, but all of them that they ask they're not going to ask, for instance, tell me an example of a time that that you travel to Arizona, right? Not everyone traveled to Arizona, so we're not going to ask a question like that. It's going to be specific questions that have to do with AS. And so while the questions will never be random, they're all going to be related to what the 5 committees do. So you heard the 5 committees, for instance, all are planning events, they're managing budgets, they're going to meetings, they're doing this and that and this and that. So the questions are all going to be related to your job as a senator. They're not going to be completely off somewhere else, you know? Now, the other version I wanted to volunteer. And so we're going to actually, Nima asked, can we give some examples of questions? And so that's what we're going to do right now with Virginia K, who you can, I think, unmute yourself. And then Kayla, if you don't mind, would you be able to stop screen share?
I'm sorry, there's construction outside of my house.
No problem at all. And give me one quick second. So Virginia, thank you for volunteering. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna role play with what an ASGCC interview looks like. And I'm gonna ask, Virginia hasn't seen these questions in advance. I'm gonna ask her to answer each question, and then I will provide some critique. And so, sorry to put you on the spot, Virginia, but I think that critique will help everyone else understand how to answer those questions. So I'll start with the first question that I have is, let me pull it up. Virginia, can you tell me about a time you were under a lot of pressure? What was going on and how did you get through it?
Yes, I can. So this is the most recent example I can think of. It was like 2 weeks ago. I had to take minutes for one of our legislative meetings, and I thought I had 3 days to record those minutes, but it turns out I needed to record a section in under 1 hour. So I was under a lot of pressure to get those minutes done and prepared. So essentially what I did in order to finish those minutes within the 1 hour is I just like sat down on my laptop, literally for an hour without checking my phone, without checking anything, and I just got them done as fast as I possibly could. And I even set a timer for myself to see like which sections I want to get done in which amount of time. So like I was like, okay, I'm gonna get the first page done in 15 minutes, and I made sure I reached that goal and like, you know, surpassed it and whatever. And I ended up completing it in 45 minutes. I just want to put that out there.
Great. So if I was grading Virginia right now from a score of 1 to 4, which is typically what the AS interviews grade at, I would grade her as a 3, which is really good, actually. I know she's sad, but it's actually a really, really good score. It's very hard to get a 4. So the reason why she would get a 3, which is a great score, is she gave a very solid answer. She gave me a concrete example of a situation, which was that she was under pressure, which is she had to do minutes. So she had this task that she had to do, a specific example of it. She thought there was 3 days, but it was actually an hour. She talked about her goal of getting it done in an hour. And then she talked about the steps that she took: set a timer, start really fast, type really fast, right? Like get it all done. And the outcome was she got it done. What would have helped her get a 4 is potentially her going into more depth in both her results and her actions. So maybe if she added to her results, you know, in addition to getting these minutes done, I really learned a lot through this process of, one, verifying deadlines and the importance of that. And I incorporated certain things that I would do in the future to verify the deadlines to make sure I wasn't in the same exact position. And then maybe she can talk about those couple things that she's going to be doing. That would maybe get her to a 3.5 now. Maybe in her actions, she could have talked about other behaviors that she did, because her actions were a little on the simpler side for me. That's why she lost a little bit there for me, where it was just, oh, I got it done, so I typed really fast and I set a timer. But what other actions did you take? Maybe it was the actions of contacting her supervisor and letting her supervisor know what was going on. I mean, if those things happened, I don't know if they did, but I'm just putting it out there. The more depth you can have in your answer, the better it is for your final score. But her answer overall was really good. Like, most people who come in don't answer to that level because they don't really talk about the STAR that we talked about. And she did. So does anyone else want to volunteer? Jenny. Maybe Jenny can unmute. Hi, Jenny.
Hi, how are you?
Good. So give me a second. Let me pull up a question for you.
Okay. Pretty nervous.
Don't be nervous. This is exactly what practice is for. We don't judge anything you say over here at all.
Okay.
So Jenny, can you tell me about a time that you had to interact with a difficult student at GCC? What was the situation and how did you handle it?
So I actually have only been at GCC for I'd say like 2 semesters, and so I actually don't really have an experience where I have actually interacted with a student that I had any difficulty with. So I give you an example with when I was at work. So I'm currently a nurse. I'm working at as an LVN at our hospital, and you know, I tend to deal with a lot of difficult patients all the time, and so what I would do, you know, especially for say a patient's family, right? They would have concerns, you know, and so my goal would be to like really give them education and make sure that, you know, we're on the same page with the treatment of the patient, you know, and with the treatment when it comes to overall treatment. For that, I actually had it resolved by continuously communicating with the family members, continuously communicating with the doctors, and ensuring that, you know, all the care expected for us, and also the care that was that we're supposed to do that we're supposed to do is given. And so the result for that, we're able to lay out a very good care plan for the patient. We're able to lay out we're able to give very good care for them. And I had learned that, if I would only do, I would take into consideration the patient's family's needs and also what we should do. Proper communication would be an essential key. And so I had learned that, these would make it a very good, this would give me a very good outcome.
Thank you, Jenny.
I'm sorry.
So, no, that's great. And I'll give you feedback right now. And so everyone could also hear it. I'm actually really glad you answered it the way that you did. So here's an example of a student who answers a question really well. She answered all the different parts, but based on how our behavioral interview process works, she would only get a 2 because she forgot one of the most important parts of the behavioral interview is when we say, give me, let me kind of read, describe a time when you had to interact with a difficult, I said student, but it's okay that she changed it to patient. But one of the things Jenny forgot is Jenny didn't actually talk about any single patient. She was talking in general about all patients, right? And so this is a great example of someone who could miss points for no reason, but if Jenny changed her answer just a tiny bit, for instance, Jenny, if you said, and you don't have to disclose patients' names or any specific situation, but if Jenny said, well, I don't have an example of a student, but I've also been a nurse for the last couple years, and I want to tell you about a difficult patient that I had just last month. The patient was brought in for, a brain aneurysm, and their specific family was being very difficult with me because of ABC. And here's how I handled that specific family. And then she can go into the steps. I connected with the doctor. I made a care plan. I did this, I did that. So Jenny's only mistake in this answer, which is so common, is that it was not specific enough. It talked too generally about all patients. And all your behavioral answers need to be specific examples. So the key there is specific. Jenny, does that make sense?
Yes. Thank you.
So overall, great answer. You talked about everything. I would just make it specific. And
Yes.
the reason for that is there's a lot of research out there around behavioral interviews is when a person who's being interviewed is forced to think about a specific answer, a specific example, they are less likely to fib on their answer, meaning to make up a story, because it's really hard to come up with a specific example really fast. That's a total, let's say, lie. But if it's a general answer, then the behavioral interview research shows that they're more likely to come up with a fake answer. And so that's why all your answers need to be specific. Any questions about these two examples that we gave to all of you, for instance?
This way of like choosing sounds so interesting. It's nice.
Yes. So, and the reason, once again, one of the things I was saying is the reason why we choose this way and why almost all companies now choose this way. If you interview for Google, they're going to interview you the same exact way because it tells you a lot more about the candidate versus asking, what are your strengths and weaknesses? I'm sure all of you probably have been to interviews where you've been asked, what are your strengths and weaknesses? And then you talk about your strengths, and then it comes to your weaknesses, and you say, my weakness is I just work so hard, and I need to learn to balance more. Everyone says that. We don't know anything about you based on those type of questions. And this is why the organization does not do those type of questions. They do very specific behavioral questions. And so I'm kind of reading over chat. Jenny, don't be sorry. You did actually really good. It's just, again, specific. Armina was saying, I wish I had these last year for interviewing. So yeah, realizing mistakes. We will have a recording up on this on the AS page. So Kayla put that down as well. And so you can yourself Google, let me close this really quick. You can actually go out and Google yourself sample behavioral interview questions. And there's many websites out there that show these. Now, obviously, again, we're only gonna ask you stuff related to the senator job. So we're never gonna ask you behavioral questions that are not related, but you can go ahead and Google that and you can come up with easily 30, 40 questions. And I'm on there, you know, on just probably the first 3 Google links that come up will give you a ton of different questions. But I think the comment around, I wish I realized these last year is so accurate. That's where, you know, a lot of people come in, they're really good and they have good experiences. They just don't articulate it well. And so when you have 150 people interviewing, those little mistakes can put you in a very, very different spot compared to someone else. Any other questions? Wonderful. So now let's go to the selection process. So perfect score is a 20 out of 20. Or is it actually, last year it was 16 out of 16, excuse me. And that's per evaluator. So that's a 4-question interview that we did last year. The first question is always a general question that we don't grade, and then the next 4 questions were graded. And so when you have multiple evaluators at your interview, all their scores end up getting averaged out. So as you can see, based on last year's, this is actually a sample of what the final rubric looks like. There was no one that got a perfect score. Someone got really close. They got a 14.83, meaning some people gave this person a 16, some people gave them a 15, some people gave them a 14.5. So that's how we are able, we ultimately average over there. Do you tell us what our score is? No, we don't. It's not something we would tell you right there. We just evaluate you. And then we basically go off that. And and there was a question about a wait list, which I'll actually answer in the selection process. I want to talk about the selection process. Once, let's say 100 people interview, or once all 150, 200 candidates interview, all their scores go into an Excel sheet by every single evaluator, get averaged out, and then we rank order them in a specific order. So if you look at your screen, you can see multiple colors. This is a question we get asked a lot. You know, I thought I did well, why didn't I get selected? And a lot of times the person did honestly do well. But we use a method to select that at least tries to, as much as possible, use these scores as the primary determining factor for who gets in and who doesn't get in. And so our top 5% of interviewers, so typically the top 5 or 6 interviewers, end up automatically getting in. So that's the #1 way of selecting. If you land in the top 5, you automatically get in. So a 12 out of 16, it will put you probably in the top 10 to 15%, and there's a very, very, very good chance you'll get in, but not guaranteed. The only guarantees are the top 5 scores in the process. That might get expanded to top 7 scores if we have a lot of candidates. Sorry, Virginia, you had a question?
Excuse me. And who are voting? How many people and who are they?
So that changes, but it depends on how many candidates we have. It will always be at least 1 staff member and at least 1 executive committee member. Usually we try to do at least 2 exec committee members and 1 staff members, and they go through the training on how to actually evaluate these. Now, if you are in the top scores, top 5, you get in. If you're in the bottom 10% or so, and we cut off a lot of names, there's actually a lot more red down there. So if there's 200 candidates, if you're in the bottom 20 scores, you automatically don't get in. And then everyone else, we discuss going one at a time, going down their score list. And most of the time, see these, there's the bright green, these people all got in. Then there is the second category of green. I would say 90% of those get in. And then as we go down to the next green and the yellow, we might have one or two who might have special skills that we bring in. But a lot of those people by that point, because remember there's only 20 slots, I would say 60, 70% of those people end up going on the wait list for openings. And people do get off the wait list because the initial admission, you know, things happen in the summer and someone may change their mind. And someone can come off the wait list. And so that's happened this semester, for instance. We do take into consideration we do take into consideration other factors too. For instance, we take into consideration your schedule. So if you cannot attend legislature meetings at 7 a.m. on Tuesdays, then you can't be in the organization. I mean, that's an instant consideration, no matter how great you did in the interview. Or if you are someone who cannot come to IOC meetings, which are in the organizations committee, you can still be considered for the other 4 committees. You just can't be in the organizations committee. So some committees have specific times, but a lot of them don't have specific times. So your schedule does play a small role, but it's not a determining factor. Yes, so if we asked, for instance, a time you disagreed with, I'm reading questions in the chat, if time you disagree with professor and you say a time you disagree with a counselor, I think, yeah, that's an acceptable answer. What we're really trying to get an idea of is how you disagree, for instance, with individuals in different positions of power, right? So if you're in a governance meeting, we're not going to ask that question. So I would just want to make sure people know, like, I'm not giving questions that we're for sure going to ask. They haven't even decided those. But, you know, ultimately, it's going to be, there's a reason why we ask each question. So if we're asking a question like that, it might be because we want to know how you would work with staff members on governance committees. And I believe that's it for the selection process. I know we have a couple minutes, so Q&A, anything else that you all have questions on? And we will have the slides and we'll have this video on for everyone to see. I think Kayla put where it's gonna go. It takes Zoom a couple of days, not a couple of days, maybe 1 day to practice. We will be reaching out to all of you to schedule your interviews sometime probably by end of June. You'll get a Sign Up Genius invite and you'll be able to schedule your own interviews. Now, if you're a returning senator, so I know there's some people in here who are current senators who want to reapply to come back next semester. These questions are not how we're going to ask you questions. That's only for new senators. Returning senators, we ask about your specific experience while in AS. So that's the only difference. Yes, so Zara asked, is it 7 a.m. and for all semesters? And it is. Tuesdays at 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. for the legislature meeting, and Thursdays 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. for the leadership class that all the new senators would have to take. Great. Any other questions? If not, I think we're pretty much done and Kayla will get these up. I think that was the last slide, or maybe one more slide. Next slide.
There are a few more questions. I don't know if you wanted to answer.
Oh, sorry. So no, you won't be able to choose your own committee. That is chosen for you pretty much once you are entered. But a lot of it is based on your skills and based on what the VPs need. But I will say there's no such thing as really like a bad committee. Sometimes people want a committee, but then they realize after they get in and it's a different committee that they actually love their new committee even more. And it's 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. for all meetings and leadership course itself. And leadership class is every week as well. So both the meetings and the course is 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. every single week, Tuesday, Thursdays. So, you know, it's also just as we end this, just so everyone knows, yeah, both Tuesday, Thursdays. Just so everyone knows, this is a pretty hefty commitment. So you have to decide for yourself, is this right for you? This is not a 1 to 2 hour a week commitment. This is a 10-hour minimum a week between all your meetings and tasks you have to do. Sometimes a 15-hour a week commitment. If you're a vice president, you work 25 to 40 hours a week in AS. Like I said, you all, the 26 people run a full corporation and all that goes into that corporation. I think that's pretty much it. And so if we go to the next slide. So good luck. If you have any questions later on, Kayla oversees in the admin committee oversees the recruitment process. So she is ASVP AD, or you can find us on Instagram and put questions there. You can also email me anytime as well. And so you'll be able to get that. Great question also coming in from Astrid. Are the meetings going to be online for the fall? Yes, from what it looks like at this point, the entire college is going to be online in the fall. But you know, I would say if you've been to any of our meetings, they are very engaging, even though they're online. Thank you so much for everyone for coming in. Hopefully this was helpful, and hopefully now you know the interview process and how to answer each question. We will post this once again. Please review it before your interviews because you don't want to go in and make mistakes that are very easily avoidable. Have a good rest of the day, and just thank you to the exec committee, the outgoing exec committee, for putting this on for everyone.
Thank you.